notion of the government creating jobs is like 19th century gas pressure studies. Yeah? You know, PV is equal to C. That's disappeared since Boltzmann and these people. Yeah, we've got a different notion of a gas. Similarly, we have to recognize the micro components of an economy and not just manipulate their expectations, but lift their expectations to the level of the culture. That, for instance, in the Second World War, Lonergan wrote articles in the Canadian newspapers appealing to people not to spend their income. In a war effort, you see, you double shifts. You bring women into the workforce, as in the Second World War. You have a massive increase of consumer income. If you spend that on the same amount of goods, all you do is double the price. Yeah? Is that fair enough? You have double the money chasing the same amount of goods.
Have you doubled the money?
Well, let's say, I'm just saying, you haven't doubled, but you add...
Only if you double the money will that effect occur.
Yeah, well, let's say that you double the shift work, you put the workforce, you add the women to armaments. You've quite a lift to consumer income. And that has that effect on basic purchase.
Don't know where else that's drawing from. I have to think about it.
Well, it's just a very sort of simple, isolated case of increase of consumer income during wartime, when you have wartime scarcity. And his advice was to buy government bonds, because you're upsetting the economy if you just rush out to spend your money. But the notion is, or his desire is, that a genuine democracy emerge where people actually are educated economically. Now, and he talks about the fact that eventually the village economist will be just as obvious as the village doctor. And that's a marvelous imaginative effort in 1942. And again, you have illustrations of it, say, in the Third World, the problem of finding out, okay, what can we do in this village? What is our promise? And you get to know the bank manager, and you work out some scheme. And yet you get the credit for a micro-innovation. Yeah? And that's very removed from our texts in economics. At the end of my introduction, I might as well quote myself. The vision of primers or primers, what do you call it in the States? Primers. A primer, yeah? Oh no, you got a special accent. I want a neutral American. Well, in Ireland we call it a primer, as a priming a pump, and you call it a primer, or the Boston people call it. Okay, so you have to envisage something that is closer to a text in business studies, and it's localized as well as being global. It has a context. So what I talk about here then, I end up by saying, but the massively innovative primers that would meet millennial needs, 500-page texts of empirically rich, locally oriented, normatively focused, non-truncated writing are distant probabilities. And you have to sort of take each bit of that. Non-truncated means that you're talking to people about human creativity and human promise. Promise is very much a level of, a luminous promise is something that somebody understands as such. Yeah? It's like pushing the analysis of belief in the last chapter of Insight so that it's a personal presence. You know precisely what you're doing when you're believing. But the emphasis earlier is it's locally oriented, that you have your village or your county, and you're understanding your county. This just isn't part of the economic textbooks. We sometimes in Canada use American textbooks, you know, and the professor says, well, you just modify the figures, you know, multiply them by 1/5, and you've roughly got the Canadian economy. So can you see the need we're pushing for here, that Lonergan is aspiring to? And the village economist is the local wise person who knows the flow of industries, possibilities, etc., and can lift the creativity in the local community, yeah? Which has gone beyond those textbooks I described where children are robots, are Skinner rats. I have a textbook where the statement is made, basically, children under the age of 6 can be investigated just like rats. And of course, you probably all know psychologists who specialize in pigeons or whatever. I helped a fellow get a master's thesis in psychology by investigating one pigeon's behavior for a year. And we wanted to roast the pigeon at the end, but the pigeon went on to get another MA. Okay, so keep looking at this. So you're dead on. That's a big insight that, yeah, it is better if the person knows where they're at in the economy. So that, yeah, when you're saving, that's what you're doing. And when the community is sensitive to that during an economic surge, which I suppose we should get on to very shortly, then in an economic surge, when there's a tremendous expansion of the surplus, the top, the credit given here, okay, 90% of it goes this way at least, yeah? Anyone who starts a new business needs workers. 90% of the innovative credit goes to the consumer orientation. If that goes straight in this direction, you have a price increase. You have an inflation. Now, Lonergan discusses the dynamics of that there's a way in which that cures the problem by a peculiar type of circulation. But there is an initial stupidity that people have a lot more money and there are no more consumer goods. Does that make sense? Now, what you would like is an enlightened community who know that there are no more goods. And that's why Robinson Crusoe, who brought up Robinson Crusoe?